Listen, I will admit, when I was in college, I was a narc. I was a narc because you know what? I don't like when people smoke pot. So if you're out in public smoking pot, like in large groups, maybe when I was like 16 at UCLA, I might have called the campus, but they didn't do anything. No harm, no foul. But here's the thing. I was right about pot. According to a new federal report on drug use, America's consumption of weed is at an all-time high, and side effects are at an all-time high as well. I've said it my entire life. I'll say it over and over again. Weed is terrible for you and also for your life. Not just because it makes you a lazy loser, but also because it's actually bad for your brain. Let's take a look at the stats. Some of us have thought that pot is gross for literally ever. For literally ever. I will admit, back in my college days, I was a little of a narc. Back in my college days, I remember that there was 420 Day on the lawn at Kirchhoff at UCLA. And it was celebrated in the school newspaper. And so somebody may or may not have called campus police to break up a giant bout of pot smoking on the lawn at Kirchhoff. Because gross. And also laws were on the books. Of course, the campus police did nothing. But put that all aside. No harm, no foul. No one got arrested. It was all fine. In any case, was pot a great idea here in the United States of America? The answer is nope. It was a completely crappy idea. Truly terrible idea, everyone. Well done. And thanks for all the propaganda about how marijuana was going to solve your back problem. That's awesome. Okay, let's be real about marijuana. Marijuana is poisoning brains at an extraordinary rate. A brand new study demonstrates that millions of people aged 12 plus have been using marijuana for 20 plus of the past 30 days. We're up to 21.5 million Americans aged 12 plus, we're talking about kids very often, who are using pot on an almost daily basis. That is now more than cigarettes and more than alcohol. If that's not good, that is quite bad. So Charles Fane Lehman over at the Free Press has a piece on this, and he points out the National Survey on Drug Use and Health estimated that marijuana eclipsed alcohol a few years back. In 2025, daily users accounted for 80% of marijuana consumption compared to 90% of cigarette smoking, but less than half of all alcohol consumptions. When we say marijuana is less bad than alcohol, well, I mean, most people were not, guzzling the beer every single day. The vast majority of people who are using marijuana were using it regularly. 74% of Americans now live in a state with recreational access to pot. 79% of Americans live in a county with at least one dispensary. 18 million people, that's 1/3 of all users aged 18 and up, have reported symptoms of cannabis use disorder. Cannabis use disorder, by the way, it robs you of your ability to think. It robs you of your initiative. Loss of control. Time spent consuming, obtaining, or recovering from cannabis use is real. You neglect your primary obligations at work, school, at home. You scale back your social or recreational activities. And again, you have to work harder to get to the same place. Americans, by the way, aren't just using pot. They are using more of it, and it is significantly more potent than it ever was. The active concentration of THC, which is the main psychoactive component in pot, has quadrupled in traditional plant matter and skyrocketed in processed products as well since like the 90s. And high-potency THC is what is driving a lot of this. It creates significantly more problems with perception and sense of time and short-term memory. It can induce severe anxiety, panic attacks, paranoia, or acute psychosis. And again, because so many young Americans have been using it, it just makes you dumb. So remember all of those PSAs back in the 80s and 90s saying that drugs make you stupid? And everyone was, no. Yes. Long-term use starting in adolescence can permanently lower your IQ by up to 8 points. That is like half a standard deviation because it disrupts your brain development. And of course, in adults, it can also create midlife brain fog, lower motivation, and learning difficulties. So all of this rots your brain and skews your brain development. Past year in daily cannabis use, there are high correlations with reporting involuntary job loss, right, getting fired, higher likelihood of missed work days. It'll bleed over into all these elements of your life. So our government decided to stop policing things it should have policed and to start intervening in things where it shouldn't intervene. Great job, government. You've done amazing. We've incentivized bad behavior on a wide variety of fronts and then promised people literally the world. And it has not worked out extraordinarily well. Get to more on this in a moment. First, when we're younger, you can sleep just about anywhere, couch, airport, questionable motel. It doesn't really matter too much. Well, now, if it's too hot, I'm awake. If the sheets feel heavy, I'm awake. If I'm awake, then everyone around the house is going to know about it the next day, also at work. So this is why I rely heavily on Boll and Branch. So I'm moving all about the house right now. We have a brand new newborn. That means the baby's up all night. And I'm moving around the house. But you know what I'm bringing with me so I get my sleep? My Boll and Branch product. Boll & Branch doesn't rely on gimmicky cooling technology or chemical treatments. Their sheets are made from 100% organic cotton and woven specifically for airflow, so they stay breathable throughout the night. Somehow, they just keep getting softer every single time you wash them. It's one of those upgrades you don't fully appreciate until you've lived with it for a while, and then you wonder why exactly you waited for so long. Sleep cooler this summer with Boll & Branch. Get 15% off your first order plus free shipping at bollandbranch.com/Shapiro with code Shapiro. That's Boll & Branch, BOLLANDBRANCH.com/Shapiro, code Shapiro to unlock 15% off. Again, that's bollandbranch.com/Shapiro to get the special deal. The best policy prescription to get Americans to stop using weed is to make it illegal again. That would be the actual best prescription with regard to pot. Again, the idea that medical dispensaries are predominantly selling to people because they have medical problems, that was always a ruse to just increase the dissemination of pot. And it turns out that when there's a market, then people are going to try and develop more potent drugs for market. This is where, again, I'm a conservative. I'm not a libertarian. When it comes to drugs, this is a perfect example of how the market will make things more efficient and cheaper. And that is what has happened with marijuana. There's more THC and it is less expensive. Also, it turns out it's really bad for you. But again, I am a conservative, so I believe that your local community should be able to ban pot dispensaries. And frankly, I think that your local community probably should. The notion that pot dispensaries and the takeover of our cities by marijuana has somehow been a gigantic boon. All the things that were promised did not materialize. If you've been in Denver recently, I got to say, Denver is a terrible place to be. You walk around and the waft of pot is just everywhere. And listen, I don't think that I should have to walk around with my children and my children are just walking by people smoking pot out in the open. I'm not a fan of this. It has those externalities, but put aside the externalities. Again, you do not have a core right to consume hallucinogenic drugs in the United States, nor did you ever. This was never a core right. This does go to what rights are for. Now, again, I'm a fan of rights, but the kind of right that I'm a fan of is an immunity from the government, because the government should not have enough power to do X. But I think that the government should have the power to restrict substances in the chain of commerce that are bad for the body politic. I do not think that is a perfectly libertarian conception. I don't think that heroin should be legalized, for example, because you don't have a right to heroin. You also do not have a right to pot. So, again, is there a great way to cut down on pot usage? I mean, the answer is the best way would be to make it illegal again, to go after dealers, to cut down on the supply of pot across the country. The argument, by the way, that's been used for as long as I've been alive is that prohibition never works, that people just use it more and more and more. That wasn't true during prohibition, and it's not true now. It turns out that when government makes something illegal, yes, a black market is created, but the amount that is distributed via the black market is far lower than it otherwise would be when you've got, for example, a liquor shop on every corner. It turns out that during prohibition, overall, it did work in the sense that Americans drank less overall. They can make the argument that alcohol shouldn't have been banned by the federal government. In retrospect, people tend to think that that's true. But I think in retrospect, we can also see that the addictive nature of pot, particularly for teenagers who are getting a hold of pot when they're 13, 14 years old and then poisoning themselves, that's been quite terrible. And by the way, that's leaving aside any of the additives that sometimes drug pushers will add to the pot. An inordinate number of fentanyl overdoses have been from the lacing of marijuana with things like fentanyl, and it kills the kid. What an amazing video you just watched. Wasn't that amazing? Well, if you think so, head on over to dailywire.com/subscribe to watch the full show ad-free, or check out this crazy story here.